Could somebody please make it make sense?
Hey everybody, welcome to A Pop of Culture. I'm your host, Esoteric and Facetious, and this is A Pop of Culture, which is my video essay podcast where I speak on pop culture, social justice, and human experience from a Black, bisexual, millennial perspective. Everything, and I mean everything I say, should be taken with a grain of salt, as I'm simply a recent college grad with access to a recording device and the internet. With that being said, my shouldn't be your sole reason to critique my views unless it's truly relevant. If you disagree with anything I say, let's have a civil conversation in the comment section below. Before we get into the topic of this video, which is going to be parents and coming out, I want to advertise my cover channel, Pop of Culture Sings, where I sing throwback R&B, contemporary R&B, pop music, whatever I'm feeling, whatever you're feeling. And also, I want to shout out everyone who supported my video on 𝑭𝒂𝒕𝒄𝒉. That video did very well for my channel, and I also got some subscribers from that, so thanks for everyone who supported that video. Part 2 is on the way. Now let's get into the topic of this video. So I was on YouTube, I was about to watch Just Lauren, which is a spinoff of Chasing Atlanta and Chasing Dallas, which follows Lauren England. Lauren England is a Black trans woman who was on the show earlier as 𝘎𝙪𝙗𝙗𝙗. She previously identified as a gay Black male, but now she's a trans woman. As I was about to start the show, I went through the comments. I'm sure I'm not the only person who looks through the comments as I'm watching the YouTube video, and I saw a lot of comments that were coming from people that were saying that Lauren needs to give her father time to accept her and to accept this identity that she has as a trans woman. While I think there is a lot of truth to that, I also got very annoyed. The reason why I got annoyed is because I feel like whenever LGBT people come out, especially Black LGBT people, they're expected to have this undying patience for these parents who had no idea. And I wanted to talk through some of these ideas and why I agree and disagree. So let's get into it. So the first thing I really wanted to break down is this idea that we have that parents didn't know this information before, and that this is entirely new information that parents need time to unpack and address. I kind of want to poke a hole in that logic and break down some things I've seen, heard, and experienced and give my thoughts. So here's the misconception. The misconception is the idea that most parents had no idea that their children were LGBT, and that it's a complete shock, and that's why they need time to think through this and process it. And I want to challenge the idea. There are a lot of parents out there who find out that their child is or might be LGBT when they're young in a lot of different ways. The first example is through the internet, through phones and technology. A lot of times young children, preteens, they're not aware of the fact that there's a thing called an internet history, a search history, and things of that sort. And if a parent is looking through their child's phone, their iPod Touch, their laptop, the family PC, they might see some things on there that might indicate, hey, this child might be LGBT. Another thing, a lot of times parents may see things that they're not supposed to see or hear things they're not supposed to hear. So they may see some text between their son and one of their male friends. They may see that these texts are not necessarily just, hey bro, how you doing text, or from their daughter and their daughter's female friend. For example, the daughter may leave her phone at the table and a text message may pop up while she's out at the bathroom that may be from her female friend, and it may be a text that is not necessarily a female friend text. Or an example I was thinking of when I was scripting this video was the idea that mom may work all the time, but she may have a doctor's appointment or something where she's off work early. So she may be at home at a time that she's not usually at home. So let's say the child holds hands with someone of the same sex when they walk home, or they kiss their little boyfriend or girlfriend because they know nobody's at home at that time or something, before they go their separate ways, and the parent ends up seeing or hearing that. There are a lot of instances within households where parents find out inadvertently that their child is LGBT or might be LGBT. And also just intuition. There are certain parents who just have a feeling their child may be the most masculine man or the most feminine woman, and they still just have this feeling, this inkling, where nobody had to tell them this information, but being around their child or just knowing their child, they just have that suspicion from interacting with them or just knowing how they interact with the world. Why do I bring up these instances? I bring up these instances because I feel there's this idea that parents are completely oblivious to their child's sexuality or gender identity, and it's always a shock, new information when their child comes out. And I want to challenge that. I think there's a lot of instances where parents are very aware of the fact that their child may be a member of the community. And sometimes it goes even farther than the examples I mentioned, where they may see or hear something that might point to that, or see something in their internet history that might point to that. There are even some parents out there who have young children, and the child will say to them when they're 5, 6, or 7, or even like 10, 12, I think I might like boys, or I think I might like girls, or I think I might be a boy or a girl. And the parent will literally get this information, and instead of trying to process this information, whether it be an inference, whether it be intuition, or whether it be the child directly telling them, sometimes the parents will go go into this denial. The parent will be in denial or try to say, oh, you don't know that, you're too young, you don't know what that's about. So why do I bring up all these instances? I bring up all these instances because I get annoyed with the fact that people will tell people, oh, your parent didn't know this is new information and things of that sort, because I feel in a lot of situations parents do have some idea, they do have some inkling that their child may be a member of the community. And why I bring that up is I feel we have to hold parents accountable. If you are a parent of somebody who you expect is a member of the LGBT community, then there are certain things you need to do to make sure that that child is getting the things they need, to make sure that child is being raised in a supporting and loving environment. One of the issues I have with this argument that parents didn't know and that this is new information is the fact that it places no accountability on the parents. While some parents didn't know or had no idea, there are some parents who did know and who did have an idea who would intentionally say things that were homophobic or transphobic to their child as a way to keep them in line or try to stop them from being themselves. There are parents out there who knew their child was probably a member of the community who would say disparaging things about the community, would say disparaging things about different public members of the community. People need to be held accountable for that. One of the issues I have is when people do come out, there's this expectation that they are always going to be patient and understanding to their parent. And I think people should be patient and understanding with their parent. But I think we have to acknowledge the role that Black parents play in their child's trauma. There are parents out there who will have a child out there who is twerking, who is singing every Nicki Minaj lyric, or a daughter who's wearing men's clothing all the time. And these parents will actively say things that are harmful to the child about the LGBT community, or who will take them to spaces like churches or barbershops where there will be horrific things said about LGBT people, and they will never take accountability for the fact that they participated in their child being exposed to homophobia or transphobia at a young age while knowing that their child was LGBT. Like I said, not every parent is aware of the fact that their child might be LGBT, but there are a lot of parents who are. And I think if you are one of those parents and you knowing your child might be a member of the community, take them to spaces where there is homophobic or transphobic things said, or you yourself say homophobic or transphobic things, you do deserve to be held accountable for that. Because if you did something you knew would potentially harm your child, that's wrong. I think if you're somebody who had an inkling that your child was LGBT and you took them to places where homophobic and transphobic things were said and you said nothing, you potentially contributed to them having a negative view of themselves and their community. If you said homophobic or transphobic things while having an inkling of the fact that your child may be LGBT, you potentially contributed to them having a negative view of themselves and their community, and you should apologize for that. I think when we say these things like, oh, they didn't know this is new information, sometimes we are unintentionally giving people a pass for the things that they did that were harmful to their child. The intention behind when people say things like, oh, your parents didn't know, this is new information to them, give them time to accept this and stuff like that, is to give parents time to adjust, which I think is good. But I think the problem is when people say stuff like that, they never consider the fact that some of these parents did know. Some of these parents did actively choose to say harmful and disparaging things to their children, and that's not okay, nor will it ever be okay. And if the relationship is to be mended, there needs to be honesty on all sides of the situation. The child is being honest with the parent, so the parent within these situations where they did have knowledge needs to be honest about things and say, hey, son, I did know that you might be that way, and I still said those things that were negative about that community, even though I knew you might be a part of it, and I'm sorry for that. Or they could say, I knew that you might be that way, and I still took you to that church where I knew they were going to say those things, but I thought that was what was best for you at the time, and I'm sorry for that. I think if these parents want to heal that relationship they have with their child, they need to take accountability. Sometimes it's not even that the parent said these hurtful things to their child, but they just didn't challenge those things. Sometimes it's not about what you say, but what you don't say. You may have not said anything homophobic, and you may have not been the one who judged your child, but you may have been somebody who allowed other people to say stuff and just didn't say anything because you didn't want to rock the boat. It's not necessarily just people who said homophobic things. Sometimes it's people who are complicit in their child hearing homophobic things. Some parents don't actually say things that are homophobic to their child because they suspect their child is LGBT, but they will not check homophobia or transphobia around their child. I think if you are one of those people, you are also a part of the problem, because even if you're not saying those things out of your own mouth, by not challenging those things in front of your child, especially your children you think might be a part of that community, you are signaling indirectly that that type of language or ideas are okay. Even if you're somebody who doesn't actively say those things at your child, I think you also need to be aware of what's being said in the presence of your child. And sometimes that may mean you may have to form some ground rules. You may have to talk to the aunts and uncles and say, you are not going to say homophobic things around my child, even if you aren't 100% sure that your child is that way. Because if you don't do stuff like that, you are exposing your child to those harmful ideas, they may internalize them, might negatively impact them and their mental health. One disclaimer I want to make is I do think that people have expectations of their children and what their children are going to be like, what they're going to look like, what they're going to do. I think there is no issue with giving people time and space to accept that the idea that they had of their child and who their child is and who their child may turn out to be may not be the same thing. There is no issue with that. But the issue I personally have is we don't often call people to take accountability for the fact that some people do have knowledge of the fact that their child may be LGBT, and instead of fostering a supporting environment for that child where that child feels free to be themselves, some parents will actively say homophobic and transphobic things that will negatively impact their child, or bring them to spaces where people will say these homophobic and transphobic things. If you're somebody who suspects your child is LGBT, you shouldn't allow that stuff to come out of your mouth. You shouldn't allow that stuff to be unchecked by other people, because you should want your child to live the best life that they can live. You should want your child to accept themselves. So you have to foster that environment through being intentional with the things you say, and also being intentional with making sure you're not putting them in spaces and environments where they're going to hear those harmful things. I really just wanted to play with the idea because that is something that does bother me. Another thing I wanted to get into real quick is sexuality and gender identity. There are some people out there who will find these things that their child does or says, and what they'll do is they'll amp up the homophobia or they'll amp up the transphobia as a way to try to course correct. They may see their son is texting another boy in a certain type of way, and so what they'll do is they'll amp up on the homophobia, they'll amp up on the transphobia, they'll try to feel like, oh, they're going that way, but I'm going to course correct. We need to hold people accountable for that too. Some parents, until their child actually comes out and says that they feel like their child's sexuality and gender identity are malleable, and if they say enough homophobic and transphobic things, their child will end up straight. We need to acknowledge the fact that people do harmful things and say harmful things to their children, and when they're held accountable for the harm that they do, they will play the victim with this whole, oh, it was new information, I didn't know, like, you have to give me time. And I'm not saying people shouldn't get time, but what I'm saying is, if we're going to be real, if we're going to heal these relationships, everyone needs to take accountability for the role that they played. And I think a lot of parents play that role of being homophobic and transphobic to LGBT children as this hope of turning them straight. And we need to talk about that. We need to say that's not okay. If LGBT people are expected to have all this patience with their family, then the family needs to be open to saying, hey, I was wrong. Hey, I'm sorry I said those things when you were younger. I was scared and I didn't know how to accept that my son was going to be like that. So I said those things even though I knew I shouldn't have. We need to just make sure everyone is taking accountability for the role that they play in the situation so that everyone can be healed and so that everyone can move forward. If you try to make that child feel like they wouldn't be accepted, then you need to understand that that child has to process those feelings too. You can process these feelings about this identity, but you need to understand that they need to process these feelings about the harm you did. And if you're sorry, you need to make that apology. You can't just expect for them to have all this patience with you if you're not going to admit where you were wrong in certain instances. So that's all I have to say on that. I think these situations can be kind of tricky. These situations take a lot of emotional maturity and vulnerability. So I just wanted to speak on that. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your experiences in the comments below. Love y'all. Bye-bye. Like this video if you like this video. If you made it to this point in the video, comment a thumbs up emoji below, or still here if you are still here. Subscribe if you want to see more, and make sure to hit that bell so you're the first to know when I upload new content. I upload new content every week. And if you're enjoying yourself, and why wouldn't you be enjoying yourself? To the left, there's a playlist of all my video essay podcasts. I have 24 and counting. In the center is a button to subscribe if you just haven't had a chance to subscribe and you would like to. And to the right is a playlist of all of my covers and parodies. So if you are wanting to check those out, feel free to do so. And if you want to support me, if you want to support the show, first and foremost, a non-financial way you can support is just through sharing this video. I can make the thumbnails, I can, make the titles, I can do the tags and do keyword research. One of the best ways that I can grow my brand is through y'all sharing this content with other people who like this type of content, because I nor you can control the algorithm, but I can control the quality of the content I make, and y'all can, if you enjoy the content, share with people who can like it, so that way, if y'all are feeling it, it's getting put out there, whether, the algorithm favors it or not. Somebody's gonna see it because you resonated with it and you resonated with me, and now you're sharing it with other people. So if